This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, with agriculture broadcaster Orion Samuelson and yours truly, Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Planting is underway across the Corn Belt, and a lot of farmers are hoping that if they plant in the dust, their bins will bust. Hello, folks. Welcome to This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson here in the studio. We'll be hearing from Max Armstrong and Orion Samuelson a little bit later on. But first, we wanted to talk to some growers about planting progress. Had the chance to get out to Will County, Illinois to talk with Dakota Cowger. He farms with his dad, his uncle, and his grandpa, and we caught up with them on their planting progress earlier this week.
Planting 2021 has been interesting so far. It's been really dry. The last 3 springs have been super wet. We've broken records spring after spring for wet, and it's kind of funny. We go to 2021, and just like how the rest of 2020 was with COVID, things flipped upside down. We're finally working with a dry year. That's been good for us trying to get in the field, work ground, and get planted, but on the other side of the coin, we're also, need to make sure that we're getting the rains that we need to get our crops started and whatnot. We started about a month ago in late mid-March, early end March, planting oats. We got all of our oats in, and they've been coming up real well, but it has been really dry here in April, so it'd be nice for us to get some rain and get both the corn and soybeans that we have in the ground and our oats a nice drink.
Well, thanks, Dakota. I did see some moisture come through Illinois at the later part of this last week. We'll check in with Greg later on in the program to see if there's more coming in the week ahead. But first, we've got to talk about other things that are happening in the world of agriculture, and that includes a move towards sustainable sourcing by some major companies in the ag space. Well, PepsiCo is one of those, and they made an announcement this past week. We want to get the details on it. To help us do that, we're joined by Christine Darty. She's the Vice President of Global Agriculture and Responsible Sourcing there at PepsiCo. And Christine, tell us a little bit about the announcement you've made.
Yeah, thank you. We're very excited about our announcement. PepsiCo is actually an agricultural company at our heart. And so for us, we want to use the responsibility to help scale a more resilient food system. We recently announced our positive agricultural ambition. And this is to source our crops and ingredients in a way that accelerates and regenerates agriculture and strengthens farming communities. We have 3 main goals. 1, spread the adoption of regenerative farming practices across 7 million acres. 2, improve the livelihoods of more than 250,000 people in our agricultural supply chain. And 3, sustainably source 100% of our key ingredients. We're very excited about this new goal.
Well, Christine, one of the things I hear from a lot of our viewers is we're farmers, we're already being sustainable. How are you going to work to engage more people in this conversation?
Yeah, we know that farmers are the heart of changing our food system to be more resilient. And so when we work with our farmers, we're going to lean in and actually look at their practices, and through peer-to-peer, farmer-to-farmer engagement, we know that we can look at things such as using cover crops or alternative tillage, or even ways that we can look at different fertilizers or agroprotectants. It's all about co-creating local solutions that are going to work with that farmer.
Well, and I know that could create a challenge. You mentioned 7 million acres you're working to get these practices applied on. And when you're looking across that broad of a geographic expanse, it's tough to monitor. How does PepsiCo plan to track these changes over the next 9 years?
Yeah, so what we have already is a really good start. We use our sustainable farming program, which actually in the U.S., 100% of our potatoes and corn that we use for our products are already sustainably sourced. And so this program works with the farmers on environmental issues, social standards, business acumen, and then we can go in with a third party to verify those practices. If you think about it, PepsiCo actually has a number of different products, such as oats for Quaker, oranges for Tropicana, and potatoes for Lay's. So we're really excited to continue to work with our farmers.
Christine, if we've got farmers who want to learn more about this initiative, where can they go to do so?
Yes, you can check out a lot of these things on our website. We have some great stories of farmer profiles around the world. And so please check out PepsiCo.com and learn more.
Fantastic, folks. Check that out, PepsiCo.com. Christine Darty from PepsiCo. Well, a lot of growers are looking for ways to make their businesses more successful, and one of the ways they can do that is through marketing. The markets have certainly been volatile, and to help us make a little more sense of them, we're joined this week by Matt Bennett from agmarket.net. And Matt, it's hard to believe that May corn contract climbed over $6 on April 20th, and then this past week we saw $7 in front of it. Where does the market go from here? And let's talk old crop corn specifically.
You know, the old crop market, if you've watched it lately, obviously the basis has been pretty darn good. Not only have we seen really good posted basis, but we've heard about some basis levels that were above and beyond that, you know, some really good pushes. The other thing is that the bull spreading in the market tells me that we're still very much intact. And so, you know, are we going to raise higher to $8 right now? I don't think so. My personal opinion is that we've shaken some bushels loose. We seem to be in a pretty good position. But at the same time, this past week here, whenever we backed off just a little bit, a couple of times, one of the local processors that we deal with went from 40 over to 50 over on a posted price. So, you know, I'm not so sure that this thing's over just yet. I think that there's still going to be a heck of a lot of tightness. And I think whenever people start talking to originators, they'll find out that some of these guys are pretty concerned about originating corn out into the summer timeframe.
Interesting. So they might be short bought all the way through this summer.
It's possible. I do think that that's going to be a difference in merchandisers by all means, but I think that some people are going to be in much better shape than others. But at the same time, I think that the person that's holding on to a lot of corn in their possession, in their bin, is going to be setting a price for themselves at times, maybe, you know, especially later on in the summer.
Well, Matt, let's talk a little bit about the market as a whole. Of course, we see prices rise, and that's supposed to do two things, right? It's supposed to increase supply and decrease demand. But as I talk to folks out in the countryside, ethanol plants are still firing up across the country. We've got livestock producers still out there getting grain bought. Have we started to ration some of this old crop corn demand in your mind?
I feel like we probably rationed a little bit, but maybe not quite enough, especially whenever you think about running the price levels we've seen. So, you know, you hear about people feeding wheat, certainly understand that, moving that into rations. But whenever we look at ethanol, you know, we bowled through another 96 million, almost 96 million bushels this past week, according to the EIA report. But bottom line for me is that margins are still pretty good. And as you say, some plants have been coming online here in the last 2 or 3 weeks. It tells me that we're going to be in pretty good shape for some time to come. And so I think this May report's going to be quite interesting. They're going to have to use, for your new crop numbers, which is the first look that we get at it, they're going to have to use those acres out of the planting intentions. And I think that the 135, I think, could be trimmed even more as far as the carryout on old crop goes. Whatever the carryout is on old crops, you're carry in for new crops. So we have to keep in mind this May report has got very few avenues to be able to be a bearish report unless you tack a 184 bushel crop on there. And I think that's a pretty far-fetched notion.
It is. I think you're right, certainly this early in the season. Now, Matt, for growers who are getting that 2021 corn in the ground out here, should they be making some aggressive marketing moves ahead of this May WASDE?
Yeah, it just depends on what you call aggressive. But I mean, for most producers, you can make a lot of money, you know, at $5, $5.25, $5.30. Some of the prices we've seen up to $5.50 out of the field, fall delivery. You start just running the numbers on what kind of costs that you're paying for. You're paying for way more costs at just normal yields at that price than what we've been able to the last several years. I understand when the market's going up every day, it kind of handcuffs a producer. They're fearful of missing out on more of a rally. But at the same time, you got to look at what your profit margins are here. And ask yourself, am I getting a little too greedy in here? Am I getting a little too fearful, of missing a move? Because bird in the hand's better than two in the bush. We haven't had these kind of price levels at planting time since back in the 2012 to 2013 timeframe.
Absolutely. Matt, another major conversation piece the past few weeks has been the spring wheat market. We've seen that market kind of flatten out, but things aren't improving in spring wheat company. What's your outlook or country throughout the next summer months?
I think that the wheat market, whenever you look at the chart, it's still got room to go up, and it could go substantially higher. I think that a couple of the guys on my team have pointed that out with agmarket.net. We've actually looked at it pretty closely. You've got to ask yourself, how many acres of spring wheat are you going to end up with, first of all? And I think that that's a little bit of a question mark. I'm not bearish spring wheat by any stretch of the imagination. If you get a really good weather pattern moving forward, then maybe you take the shine off of it. But there's a lot of folks that want to own spring wheat right now.
All right, lots of things to discuss. We'll be back with more with Matt Bennett. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by the Soybean Checkoff. Tips, videos, how-tos, and more. If it has to do with ag tech, you'll find it in the Tech Tool Shed, your unbiased one-stop resource. And we're back talking markets with Matt Bennett. Matt, while we're talking about soybeans, we saw another good solid week of exports, particularly in this old crop bean market. Caught me by surprise. What's your reaction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times you come in here, especially in this time frame, we had so many good sales earlier in the year, and a lot of talk about, well, what's China going to do? Are they going to cancel? We know South America had a pretty good crop. Brazil ended up with a good crop, but we tiptoe in thinking, what kind of net cancellations are we going to see? And actually we saw that, I believe 2-3 weeks ago, but the last couple of weeks, including this week, another 250,000 metric tons of sales here this morning. Excellent sales, especially whenever you combine, we had some new crop sales as well. So it's nice to see, and I think it's much better than expected, especially on the old crop for me.
It is. And, Matt, when we look at what's been driving the bean market, obviously exports have been a huge component of it, but the crush domestically has been running really, really strong as well. When you're out there looking at the breakup between meal and oil in the soybean complex, what's your take here heading into the summer?
Well, I think that the meal market could have absolutely caught fire if Argentina wouldn't have finally got some rain later in their growing season. We all know that they usually export around half or more of the world's soybean meal. But I think oil, the biodiesel demand, it's been robust. It's been a really good thing to see. And I think moving forward, typically what we see is that the meal market can many times lead the soybean market higher. But this year, I think at times we've actually seen the oil market lead the market higher. So, what's the relationship going to be? I think crush is going to remain fairly strong. There's still going to be a huge demand for soybean meal, with China saying, we're going to continue building our pork production. ASF has been a concern at times, but obviously maybe not as big a concern as what they are increasing production, and so I feel pretty good about meal demand moving forward, any sort of protein demand whatsoever. And of course, I feel really good about soybean oil whenever we're looking at this biodiesel situation.
Absolutely. Now, Matt, you mentioned in our first segment that a lot of traders aren't wanting to go into this May WASDE report from the USDA short corn. As you look at your expectations for this report with regard to new crop soybeans, what are your expectations?
You know what, we're at 120 on carryout. You use 87.6 on acreage, and tell me what kind of yield that you're going to have to post up there, just to get a decent carryout whatsoever. My opinion is this: yes, you can come up with a 53 or 4 bushel yield and still come up with some carryout there, but 87.6 on acres, given the demand we've seen for old crop, given the demand that we have forecasted, just from the baseline numbers from the USDA, but all of us kind of seeing and knowing how good demand is right now. 87.6 isn't enough. It's just not enough. So do I want to go into this thing bearish? Probably not. At the same time, a lot of this stuff's quantified. We kind of know this already, but I would tell you this, you're going to have a hard time coming up with what would be labeled a bearish report whenever it comes to soybeans here in May. I just don't see any avenue for that.
All right. Well, let's talk the livestock markets. Matt, I have been really excited about this cattle market, and I have been let down consistently for the better part of this past year on live cattle. Do you anticipate any near-term run-up in cattle pricing?
I feel like this sell-off here recently has maybe been a little bit overdone, especially as people get to going out to restaurants more and more. You talk to anybody who's close to a lot of the cities here in the Midwest, you can't even hardly get into some of these restaurants, first of all. And the other thing is Mike, you and I like grilling out. We know that. A lot of us like grilling out. I like to have a good, big, juicy steak. And so demand's going to be pretty strong. I expect the weakness that we've seen lately is going to subside, and we'll be able to build a little bit of value. I think we all know that later in the year and into the first quarter next year, you're going to see pretty good value here with fats. The problem for me is feeders. It's tough for these guys right now, not knowing what feed costs are going to be. And if you lock in feed costs and lock in feeders here, good luck finding black ink.
That's the truth. Matt Bennett from agmarket.net.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. Combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability. Well, the bubble wrap just keeps piling up in the garage, thanks to Mr. Chad Colby as he continues to lead me into new technology. I can't have enough light these days. I need more light, so I'm throwing away some of the old flashlights that I've had for many, many years, with exceptions. I still have the Rural Electric Annual Meeting flashlight and the Seed Company flashlight, but some new LEDs are arriving on the scene. Let's see what Colby's trying to get me to buy this week.
You guys have seen these little headband lights. They've been around for a long, long time, and they do a pretty good job. You can see right here, I've got one mounted right across the top of my forehead, just straps on, and wherever I point my head, you've got light. But I saw a different light that I really kind of took an interest to because those single headband lights were kind of annoying for me. You can see right here, it's got a rechargeable battery, a waterproof strap, and let me tell you, this is a different way of looking at light. It gives you 210 degrees illumination. So as I'm moving my head around right here, everything I'm already looking at is already lit up. This has a 32-hour runtime. It's super lightweight, and it's waterproof. Now, the reason I bought two of them is the second one, you can use conventional batteries. That's important to me only because I plan to store that one in my airplane as a backup light. And because these lights have different modes, it'll work really well in my airplane. And I wanted to demonstrate that to you. So it's easy to use. You just take the battery, it goes right around the back like you see here, and then you just plug it in. Now, you'll see me right here click the button. It's got a high, medium, and a low, red, and a distress flashing light. You see joggers with them. I've seen a lot of people with these lately, and they're pretty neat for under $50. What about you, Mike? Do you have a favorite flashlight?
Thank you, Chad. I sure do have a favorite flashlight. I've got a big old mag light that I love to have on hand, but most of the time I end up using the bad light on my cell phone. Chad Colby, always illuminating. Every year, the American Soybean Association awards what they call their Conservation Legacy Award. This is a program they started in order to recognize outstanding achievements in the environment and in conservation. Over the next several weeks, we'll have the chance to meet some of the winners. This week, we're meeting the winner of the Upper Midwest region, who is also the national winner.
Brian Ryberg is not afraid to say he does things a little differently.
You know, some might think we're an oddball and others like what we're doing, and that's okay.
The Buffalo Lake, Minnesota farmer who owns Ryberg Farms with his wife Sandy says his dad Howard has always been conservation minded.
Well, I think it's a good idea. We need to get less tillage.
That mindset on a farm which produces corn, soybeans, and sugar beets has evolved over the last decade, but it didn't happen without some realization.
We were just working the heck out of our ground multiple times in the fall, spending a lot of labor, a lot of tractor hours, a lot of fuel.
It wasn't until he noticed corn was taller and greener on worked-up pasture land at a farm he rented. There was a difference compared to the crop on tilled soil. Not thinking he could leap straight to no-till, he tried strip-till.
So right out of the gate, I had people stopping on the yard, friends of mine that would tell us, "What are you doing? This is never going to work in this country."
Since then, Ryberg has been told he's one of the first growers in Minnesota to strip-till sugar beets. You won't see a disc ripper, field cultivator, or chisel plow in the shop either. 100% of his farm is either strip-tilled or no-tilled in an area where very little has traditionally been done.
We took a infrared thermometer gun and went out there and checked the temperature of our soils in the strips, checked the neighbor's ground, and we were always as warm or warmer than they were.
Fuel consumption has dropped from 7 gallons per acre to 4.
We cut our hours in half, we cut our manpower in half, we cut our investment in capital in half.
And Ryberg believes one reason the majority of the soils in his area are conventionally tilled is because soils here are a heavy clay loam. The perception is the soil is too cold and wet to successfully grow cover crops or leave a lot of residue on the soil surface without hurting yields, something he says he's debunked.
It just seems like the less tillage we do, we're finding out the soybeans respond to that really well for yield.
Over the last decade, he's implemented cover crops on 70% of the operation, either as interseeding or after harvest to prevent erosion.
We're not losing our topsoil, and you can't rebuild topsoil very fast.
He's still learning, but primarily spread cereal rye.
If we can feed that soil through cover crops and whatnot and continue to feed that biology, maybe that accumulates and just continues to grow for the next generation to take advantage of.
He's also looking at ways to get a cover crop on his sugar beets, applied before harvest so it can survive the winter.
Or the cereal rye coming through.
Living in the land of 10,000 lakes, Ryberg tests the soil every 3 to 4 years and has installed mandatory buffer strips of at least 16.5 feet on all public waterways. With above average rainfall the last 3 years, he sees the importance of adequate drainage, and that continues to be a focus.
We've noticed cleaner water running into our drainage ditches. We're not taking soil with it, back to the erosion thing. It helps for weed control because you have a mat of residue out there.
While Ryberg may do things a little differently, he's proud of the progress made to conserve the land and the continuous changes to make it even better. Congratulations to Brian Ryberg, a Regional American Soybean Association Conservation Legacy Award winner.
Congratulations to Brian on his win. It's fantastic to see these folks out there making improvements in their local environment. If you want to learn about more of the winners, visit soygrowers.com. And of course, agriculture is an industry that inspires a lot of passion. There are folks working in agriculture who would say they've never worked a day in their life because they love their jobs so much. Al Gustin introduces us to a sheep shearer who lives that same way.
I enjoy every day, but I think I enjoy it more now.
Hillary Geetson enjoys sheep shearing more now because the pressure's off.
I used to go at 200 every day, and now I'm more like 150.
He has slowed down a little and is a little more selective about accepting shearing jobs. Geetson's been shearing sheep since he was 15. He's 59 now, that's 44 years. He won't say how many sheep he has shorn, although he knows.
I have it documented every day from when I was in high school of who I sheared for, how many, and what the rate was.
The total, well over 1 million, over 1.2 million.
Likely more than any American ever has.
Although Geetson has an extensive clientele in this part of the country, he also has shorn sheep overseas in Europe, Australia, and New Zealand.
So I've been to now 6 continents and 23 countries. And a lot of sheep.
He says overweight sheep are harder to shear, but most sheep, he says, are easy to deal with. And most sheep people are too, he says. Geetson cherishes the relationships he's developed.
There's over 300 customers. And some of these guys, there's 2 of them that are 44 years. There was a farm I did a while ago. I was shearing for the 4th generation.
Doing what he loves. How much longer are you going to keep doing this?
I tell people a good 10 years. Let's see, I'm 59, and I tell people 72.
For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Al Gustin.
Well, thank you, Al, for that piece. It's fantastic to hear somebody's lifelong passion come through just in their voice. Folks, don't go away. We've got a lifelong passion for this industry. And later on in the program, we'll talk a little bit about mental health and what that might mean down on the farm. And Max brings us the story of a man who's planting just like it 70 years ago. So stay with us on This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Springtime, of course, is a time of joy on a lot of farming operations as we prepare to get that seed in the ground, but it can also be a time of stress as we watch the weather and the market volatility. Well, May is Mental Health Month, and Max is talking with Adrian DeSutter about things you can do on the farm to manage your stress.
Well, we know that every spring, farmers are very much excited about getting into the field. They look forward to spring field work, and yet at the same time, Mike, planting time can be so stressful. During this month of May, which is also Mental Health Awareness Month, we wanted to devote some attention to that aspect of rural life, the farmers and ranchers and their mental health. To help us with that is Adrian DeSutter, who is an agriculture wellness advocate. She's a counselor. She also happens to be married to a farmer in Illinois. She talked about the stresses of farm life.
For the life of a farmer, there's no off season really. It's always a busy season. So there's always a lot of things on your plate, a lot of heavy weights on your shoulder with different stresses that can come up with, again, managing the family, like you said, those time constraints, dealing with all of the different uncontrollable factors. You know, you're worried about markets, you're worried about disease, you're worried about pests. You know, every farmer is a little bit different in the things that stress them out. But ultimately, I think the biggest advice I suppose I could give is for farmers to realize that stress is okay. I think you know, it's okay to have stress, it's okay to expect stress during your busy season, but that we have to make sure that we're staying in control. And when you start to pay attention to your stress and realize when you're, you know, getting irritable when you don't want to, or you know, you're not becoming the person you want to be, I think that when you feel that lack of control, that's when you know you probably need to take a step back and start managing your stress a little bit differently.
I noted the other day we caught up with you as you were heading toward a family vacation. I guess there is a family season maybe too that we should keep on the radar screen as one of those relief valves during stressful times.
I would argue that family season should be every season, but it's tough to balance your home life with your farm life because it's the same life. You know, farming is a lifestyle. We're feeding and watering cattle right on our own, you know, at home. We're right now trying to make this video thing work, and I've got my kids in the background right now. So we're always trying to balance, you know, how we can keep things rolling, you know, with home and with farm.
I noticed you tweeted something the other day about not skipping meals at busy times of the year. That's not helpful, is it? And in fact, I've seen some meals delivered to the fields where it becomes quite an event. It's quite a spread that's being taken out to the field. That breaks the day up a little bit, maybe helps relieve the stress some.
Absolutely. And you know, it's hard to find the time, but it's there. We can make that time to be, again, with family or whatever those stress relievers are. Like you said, taking that 5 minutes, even just 5 minutes to hop on out of the tractor and you know, visit with your kids or your grandkids or your spouse or whoever it is that's bringing meals your way. Even if family isn't something that you use as a stress relief, even just making sure you're hitting those basics, making sure you're getting sleep or not skipping meals, or, you know, swinging by a gas station on your way to work and grabbing fast food or something. We know that when we don't meet those basic needs of eating and sleeping and resting, that really amplifies the way that our stress impacts our bodies. Now, I'm saying that, but I know in our home, I'm going to be realistic, and that's just not going to happen. We're not going to get 8 hours of sleep during planning. We're going to skip meals here and there. So, you know, I preach that, but I think the reality is, instead of focusing on getting it all, know yourself, know what your own limits are. If you know that if you can skip a breakfast, you're okay, then have at it, you know, or if you know you don't need as much sleep as someone else, that's fine. But just knowing your own stress and knowing what works for you, I think we have to take a really active role in figuring out not only what causes us stress, but how that stress is relieved. And if that's family and taking those quick breaks, or if that is just, you know, on your way home from work, naming 1 or 2 things you're grateful for. Whatever it is for you, you just have to make sure you know what that is.
It is such an important topic in the rural community, and during this Mental Health Awareness Month, each weekend, we'll revisit the topic with the help of Adrian DeSutter. Mike?
Don't let that stress get the better of you. Thank you to Max and Adrian. Folks, we will be talking to Adrian each week here in the month of May, as it is Mental Health Month.
Now, agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier brings us his farm weather forecast for the nation for the week ahead. It's presented by Pivot BioProven, the nitrogen-producing microbes that stay put, whether or not.
And it's time to turn our attention to the weather once again. Greg Solier is here to join us. Greg, what are you expecting as you look out at the Pacific Northwest in this coming week?
Nothing too impressive on the maps and charts. Par for the course late to April. Hey, it's May just about, and as it ought to be, a little bit chillier than you'd like to see. No significant substantial moisture, so we continue with drought-related issues here for the foreseeable future. Frontal boundary on the move here. Bit of an upper air trough here. Some warmth and more moisture back across the Dakotas, coming off a little nip in the air of late, and any moisture we can come up with will certainly help their drought situation. Second half of the week, that weather system is eastbound. Again, there is nothing to curtail or stop the drought. A wet snowflake up near the Canadian border, higher elevations as well. Otherwise, it's a seasonal approach to outdoor work and field work. Northern California to the Pacific Northwest as high pressure settles on in for the middle and late portions of the week. Kind of a cool looking map and chart here, but you know what? There's just not a lot to expect here moisture-wise, as is the case at this point in springtime. Frontal boundary on the move will eke out a little bit of something through the Four Corners, Central and Southern Rockies. Severe weather potential. This is the drought area. You go farther east, they're improved. So it's one thing or another into the plain states. And again, uneventful weather through the valleys of California with relation to moisture. Stories are continuing to build with water restrictions and all that as the drought continues on. We foresee in the months to come. Little change in the valleys of California, quiet through the southwest, warm, dry weather across the central and southern plains, the middle and late portions of the week there.
Now, Greg, this past week we saw the cold weather lift out of the northern Corn Belt and a lot of planters started running. Is that going to keep up?
Yeah, I think so. A little bit of a nip in the air expected to build back into the northern plains, and here it is on this cool front, and maybe into the Red River Valley, Corn Palace area, and more so to the east. And this is a drought area too. Showers and thunderstorms in the forecast. Again, nice to be talking about early planting for a change. So a couple of delays are still into play early to middle parts of the week, still lingering through the Ohio Valley, Lakes region on northward, middle to late portions of the week. Back to dry time, cooler. No big substantial need for moisture, but again, a lack thereof in these drought areas across the Dakotas and points on westward. More severe, would you believe, those softball-sized hail balls into parts of the Texas plain area last week, and there's more severe weather potential into parts of the Delta, southeastern plains, where they have been well watered down of late, and at least that weather system does blow on by, stalls out Gulf Coast, couple of showers there, but cooler, drier air, opportunities to assess those winter wheat fields coming off the cold a few weeks ago, expected later in the week.
And now, Greg, looking over to the eastern seaboard, we've seen some moisture work its way all the way to the coast. Is that going to continue next week?
Yeah, last week 1 to 2, some spots 3 and 4 inches, roughly in that I-70 corridor on southward. More rain to the forecast, but again, we should have made some good movement on corn and soybean planting across the Corn Belt. There are some delays back into play with this frontal boundary. And again, dry areas across the northeast of New England where the moisture would be appreciated, and we'll get it with widespread showers and thunderstorms expected there late in the week. Back to cooler, drier, seasonal air, quiet weather pattern for the Corn Belt and points on westward later on into the week. It's been one after another of these severe weather outbreaks into Texas, the Gulf Coast, the southeast. More to come here early in the week. Heads up on the severe weather potential. Quiet weather for now into the Carolinas, the southeastern portions of the country. A couple of showers expected down through Florida. Later in the week, showers and thunderstorms on the move, drenching rains and severe west to east. Plan accordingly.
Now, Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country. Presented by Pivot BioProven. Visit pivotbio.com to find a representative near you.
Well, Greg, you have mentioned several times for the past few weeks the dryness across large swaths of the country.
Yeah.
The precip in this week ahead, any of it going to fall where it's needed most?
Well, we've seen that already. More to come, and that, at least as it applies to the heartland, certainly includes areas of the Great Lakes, the parts of the central Corn Belt, and points out of the east, including the northeast of New England. So you can see this corridor here. Additional improvement anticipated. We are well watered down across this part of the country and in excess in some locales, maybe an inch or two once again into parts of the Corn Belt. Yeah, key drought areas including parts of Big Sky, the Dakotas, the southwestern half of the plains, the desert southwest to the Pacific Northwest, scattered moisture there. And unfortunately, I think this story here across the plains and points on westward, little significant improvement expected in the weeks and probably months to come.
Well, Greg, I know the temperature has been feeling a little bit nicer lately. How does it look as you get into the mid-May?
Yeah, kind of the feel of springtime on occasion, but at times we get that raw north and northeasterly wind, and here's this little puddle and muddle of cool to cold air through the northern and central plains, the warmth down through Texas, the southeastern part of the country, and the eastern states. So where soil moisture is okay or excess, things will be hopping and popping quickly in this part of the country with a corridor of wet weather up and down the eastern seaboard. This is good news. Yes, it does lead to planting and field work delays, but we needed the moisture. The Dakotas, the upper Midwest, parts of the western Corn Belt too, drying out across the Rio Grande and points on westward, nominal precip in the Pacific Northwest.
Now, how about as we get towards the week of May 17th? Greg, what are you expecting?
Well, I would think things are going full tilt out there. We would anticipate from a planting standpoint across the plains and more so the Corn Belt locale, some cooling of soils here over eastern areas all the way down to the Piedmont, normal temperatures, Florida, much of the plains, the warmth, the hot ridge, the warm ridge, if you will, from about the divide on westward. We do get this slingshot effect of systems bringing some moisture to Washington State, upper Midwest, delays through the Corn Belt and into the eastern states, still plenty of dryness down through Texas and especially through California.
Now, before we let you go, Greg, take us up to Memorial Day weekend.
All right, quickly, yeah, it'll be kind of a busy weather pattern. First, cool air to the north. Here's the warmth down south, back to the western states. This trough is still omnipresent across much of the heartland and points out of the east, and that's the reflection point for showers and thunderstorms. Not the whole way, the whole rest of the spring and summer will go, mind you, but some additional delays as well as recharge for the upper Midwest and Corn Belt is expected.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Well, we put out the call, show us what's in your shop. And as we see these projects being readied, we get the feeling there's a sense of urgency, just as there is among farmers trying to seed the crops this spring. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. They say it's the best quality tool cabinet you'll ever buy. When you see it, when you see the quality, when you see the color of the finish, you will believe it's the best you can buy. Go to their website to see the array of models they have and the variety of colors at storelock.com. Well, there's quite an array of things being worked on in the shops right now, getting ready for that tractor show season ahead, the parades, the festivals. First of all, this is in a suburb of Chicago where Rick has a Super H. He must have thought I would like to see one of those. He wasn't wrong. Our friend Devin's Tractor Parts in Indiana, I would imagine almost always has something red he's working on in the shop, like this Farmall H, also in Indiana. Becky showed us some Alice Chalmers Orange, albeit quite faded. That engine is getting some attention in the state of Indiana. In Oregon, Tractor Mike, he's called, showed us what a Ford 9N looks like in the midst of restoration. I believe he's getting close to the home stretch on that one. And finally, Kent in North Carolina thought we should see the undercarriage of the beautiful blue 75 more that he's working on there. New belts, brakes, and repainting. He said, I like to have the undercarriage look as good as the top side. Whatever the model is, that late model equipment moving across the block at Bigiron, you get a good close look at it via their website. Here's the weekly report from Mark Stock at Bigiron Auctions.
Well, Max, we've got two big auctions on Bigiron.com this week. On Wednesday, May the 5th, there'll be 1,300 items selling for people all across America. We have a big sale for Mike and Carl Ashdown on their estate sale in Highmore, South Dakota. They've got Freightliner Columbia semi-trucks, Case 521 FXR wheel loader. They've got Case IH Steiger 380 four-wheel drive tractor and a Case IH 7220 and 8920 mechanical front tractor, plus a 2017 John Deere 569 round baler. Jay Capital from Marino, Colorado, they've got a John Deere 9870 combine selling and a John Deere 635D draper head. We've got a big classic car auction on May the 6th featuring just under 800 items. The featured seller, Chevrolet USA Museum from Elk Creek, Nebraska, has a ton of Chevrolet, Malibu, Impalas, Corvettes, just an unbelievable collection selling to the highest bidder. In addition, we've also got Dodge Super Bees, Ford Mustangs, and Thunderbirds. Pontiac GTOs. A wide variety of classic and muscle cars will be sold on this big special classic car auction May the 6th on Bigiron.com. Go to our website for all the latest information.
The FFA Chapter Tribute is sponsored by Nationwide, the #1 farm insurer in the country. To register your FFA chapter, go to nationwidesupportsffa.com. That's nationwidesupportsffa.com. Nationwide. We stand for you.
Well, this week in Agribusiness is proud to continue our salute to the FFA. This week, we're going down to the southeast. We're going to Georgia to talk with Hope Tompkins. Hope is the Georgia North Region State Vice President for the state FFA. Hope, let's talk about this past year. You're finishing up your senior year in high school. How's it been serving as a vice president?
Yes, sir. It's been an amazing journey so far. I think with my senior year especially, I was able to be fortunate enough to where I had taken most of my academic classes the earlier years. So the only class that I really had this year was a social studies class with economics, which I actually got to learn a lot in. And it was a very fun experience where I was able to just fully immerse myself into state office because I didn't have that academic rigor that I was worrying about. So I definitely think that I was able to meet lots of students this year through the virtual platform and in-person conferences. Unfortunately, one of our in-person conferences, I did have COVID in January, which was our discovery conference for us. So I wasn't able to attend that one, but I know that my teammates made a very good effort of putting on that conference for our students.
Fantastic. FFA is a team event, that's for sure. Hope, as you look out to the future, what does it hold for you?
So as I'm graduating this year, I've applied for many scholarships, and I'm actually going into agribusiness next year, and I'll be going to North Georgia Technical College, and I'm hoping to receive my associate's degree there and then pursue a bachelor's degree at a bigger college like ABAC or UGA.
Fantastic. The industry of agriculture is stronger with young people like Hope Tompkins staying involved. Thank you, Hope.
Thank you.
Now, Samuelson Says. Insight and commentary from Orion Samuelson.
This week, I am back at our Midwest headquarters after spending a few weeks in Arizona and the desert country of the Southwest, where I did enjoy the warmer temperatures and the blue skies and the lack of snow. And very often I'm asked to name my favorite season. I would say any time from planting time in the spring to growing time in the summer and to harvest time in the fall. And my unfavorite time is, of course, winter time. But as we look at the weather stories so far this year, I'm concerned that we're seeing the word drought too often, too much, even in the Midwest and other parts of the country where the lack of snowfall or the lack of rainfall is starting the crop season with a possibility of drought. Don't like that word, and I don't like that word at all. But green of spring, the flowers of Arizona, and the green and the harvest colors of summer and fall, yes, my favorite crop times of the season. So as we move into the harvest season, through the county and state fair season, I hope we have good weather for attendance at those agricultural events. But most of all, I hope we have good weather to promote growth in the crop that is so important, not only to the producers of the U.S., but the consumers of the world. That's what we do so well, even with challenging weather here in the United States. So be safe, be well, get your vaccine. My thoughts on Samuelson Says.
Earlier this week, I saw a farmer in north central Iowa getting his corn in the ground with a 4-row wide International Cyclo-Air planter. Well, he wasn't the only one out there this past week getting some seed in the ground with some antique iron.
Well, as the growers worked diligently during this intense time to put the seed in the ground, we were pondering the other day how farmers manage that Herculean task. with so much smaller equipment 50, 60 years ago? Well, our friend Bill Burnham on his farm in northern Illinois helps remind us of how it used to be. I stopped the other day to visit with Bill, who on his farm had a 67-year-old International Harvester tractor hooked up to pull a John Deere planter that has to be almost 60 years old. On a beautiful day, to help preserve a bit of the past on his farm, Bill was planting hill drop corn, they called it. The Model 495A planter, one that was quite popular with John Deere back in the day, advertised as a planter that could put the seed in the ground at 7 miles per hour. As Bill shared with me, that was pretty fast back in those days. He was planting 3 kernels together there, 19 inches apart, a plant population of 26,000, just as his dad had done all those years ago. They did it up until 1972, I think he said. Planting the seed in a group like that allowed the crop to grow faster. You could cultivate it sooner and get at the weeds quicker. But thankfully, Mike, growers today aren't restricted to a 4-row or 6-row or even an 8-row planter, as they need bigger machines really to cover all of this acreage and to get the crop in a timely manner.
I think it's really neat to see farmers keeping the old way of doing things alive. Well, and some old iron actually sold at an auction this past week. The tractor from Field of Dreams, a John Deere 2640, sold at a sale and brought $64,000. There's a lot of enthusiasm for that older equipment as well. Folks, thanks for joining us on This Week in Agribusiness. We look forward to seeing you right here next week.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. You never farm alone. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communication in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.